Hello and welcome to the Phoenix 5 Info Show. I'm your host, Lieutenant Vince Lewis. Coming to you once again from the Phoenix Police Headquarters in beautiful downtown Phoenix. I want to welcome my co-host, PIO Sergeant Rob Scherer. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, boss.
I also want to welcome back a previous host, Senior PIO Ryan Cody. Welcome to the show.
Lieutenant, always great to be here.
You bet. And then, of course, welcome back our Public Information Specialist, Yahtzee Medina.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So your job, Yahtzee, specifically is to manage. You're one of a team that manages the social media for the department, for outward communications. And what you've been charged with doing is telling our story for us. But here's one of the series that we're going to cover today is the Good Police Work series. So police officers, first responders across the board typically aren't ones to toot their own horns. They're not going to go out and celebrate their own successes or even really talk about some of the good police work that they do. It's just all in a day's work. But it's your job to find those stories, pull the information out, put it out there for everybody to see, to celebrate our successes because we are proud of the work that they do. And we're talking about officers that go out and they'll help people who are experiencing homelessness, people who are in crisis. They're helping victims and families and even suspects in some cases. They're doing things like administering life-saving Narcan, performing CPR. They're pulling people from wrecked and burning cars and buildings, running into danger when others are running away. That's just what they do. And they do it, they're unsung and they do it all the time. So part of what you do is to tell these stories. We're going to cover a few of these fantastic stories. There's too many to really cover in the time that we have, but I do want to highlight some of the most recent ones. Let's go back to a homicide cold case arrest in 2014. What was that like? What was that about, and how was it to cover?
Yeah, so this was a very particular case, and it was one of the many amazing ones we get to see. So this one caught our eye because this homicide suspect had been wanted for 10 years, and officers believe he had fled to Mexico. So they were responding to a trespassing call, and once they got there, they were able to see cues in the suspect. He was acting very suspicious. So when they identified him, they realized this was a man that was wanted for homicide from 2014.
Yeah, just a great example of, we're kind of trained to recognize some of those cues, and as you get in the elder years of this job, sometimes you don't look past them, but sometimes you're like, I've seen this 40 times. The first 40 were fine. And sometimes you go to these trespassing calls and you're just kind of moving people along, if you will. You're not, there's plenty of radio traffic to go out and other calls to answer. So you're not necessarily going through the process of identifying everybody. These officers saw those cues, took that extra step, identified people, and were able to solve a homicide of all crimes that was 10 years old. Just great work. I can imagine, those cold case detectives and those original homicide detectives at the beginning finding out, wow, we were finally able to get our hands on this person, and the family getting to know 10 years later that case is going to be put to rest.
And this is how it happened, right? Like someone who's been working on that case for years and years and years is like, you just stumbled upon a trespassing call. I'd love, also to highlight the idea that you never know what you're going to get when you go on a call. There's no such thing as an ordinary or a mundane call. And then also the teamwork that went into making this happen. Not only do you get the call from dispatch, trespassing, ordinary, I hate to use that term again, but you get there, and then once you identify someone's name, you run that through the system. I imagine what's that process like, and then learn, oh, goodness, we got a much bigger situation on our hands than we originally thought.
Yeah, this was a nonviolent call for service that led to solving a violent crime that was over 10 years old, cold case. So, but we also find ourselves in situations that are nonviolent. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And so I guess that brings us to our next video, which is one from 2023, where we had an adult male who was experiencing schizophrenia. And obviously not the first time that this has happened, and his family well documented what he had been dealing with. He showed back up at his mother's house when he was going through a particular episode. And so his mom, knowing what to do, she's been dealing with this situation for a long time, calls the police, and they initiate what we would call a 918 transport, which is essentially a man in crisis, or one person in crisis needs medical attention, needs to be transported by law enforcement to the hospital or to whatever medical facility that he or she would need to go to. So what happens is the first responders, the officers, show up, and they notice this man immediately in the backyard talking to himself, acting kind of erratically. And what happens from there is the man he's combative. He's going through an episode, certainly dealing with some demons on the inside. And he said that, he was having flashbacks and things of that nature. So immediately, this goes to a training that is mandatory at the Phoenix Police Department, which is called ICAT, which stands for Integrating Communications, Assessment, and Tactics. And essentially what that means is it's a way to create time, distance, and cover in all situations, not including a firearm. Because obviously when you introduce a firearm to a situation, the whole distance factor becomes a lot less relevant. You're in danger almost no matter where you are. So this was a perfect example of how this officer used those 3 tenets of ICAT to make this man feel comfortable. He even said, I'm not coming to you until you're ready for me to come to you. This was a day that was well over 100 degrees, and this officer spent about an hour just talking back and forth, trying to connect with this individual in the backyard of his mother's house, and eventually was able to move in with some of the other officers who were in the front yard, I'll say, which is also part of this, is you don't want to make him feel uncomfortable and think there's 20 officers there because he could feel cornered. He gained a rapport with this individual. They were able to bring him in and get him the treatment that he needed. Eventually, they were able to allow him to feel comfortable enough to get in the back of the police car and take him and get the treatment that he needed. So well done all around.
Excellent, and what's what we call good police work.
That's right.
So more of that good police work, that service that we're talking about, that spirit of service that drives us to go out and do good. We help people, we help victims, but sometimes we even help suspects, right?
Yeah. There's what are we going to? The third one here?
Yeah.
Man lost his wallet.
Yep.
Yeah, Phoenix PD. We ended up going out. Officers were identified who picked up the wallet and recovered those items, including $3,000 cash, which I can imagine when they got it back to them. I think at the conclusion of this, officers found out that the person didn't have any money, which obviously that $3,000 is going to come in handy to that person. This isn't. Obviously, the $3,000 is a huge factor, but I can attest there's been plenty of times where you find something, someone leaves something somewhere. Most of the time, almost all the time, officers are going to reach out and try to get that back to them. We know what it is to lose even an ID, what a pain it is at times to get your ID. This is something common. Obviously, that $3,000 in cash is a huge element to be able to get back to this person.
Yahtzee, this was a great story, right? How
Yes.
well did it do online?
It did very well. So I think our community likes to see the things our officers do. And the great thing about social media is not just our followers get to see that content. Social media works great at pushing the content to people that aren't our followers. So we're able to see sometimes on the metrics on social media what audience it has reached. And it's always amazing to read the comments and see all the great work and people being so proud of our department and all the great things that they do for the community.
They're generous. They're generous with their own money out of their own pockets. They're generous with their time too. A case in the case of the missing or the lost 91-year-old woman. An incredible amount of empathy and care went into how they were relating to this woman. So back in March of 23, the Phoenix police officers went above and beyond to help a 91-year-old woman. Do you know the story, Ryan?
Yeah, so I've seen the video. Were you the one that put this together?
Yes.
So I will defer to you a little bit on this, but I did see the video. I just think it's great testament to the empathy involved here for officers to be able to recognize that someone was in need of help. And as a first responder, again, you never know what you're going to show up to and how you react to that. This was a great example.
Yeah, this one was a really, really good one. Even when I was putting the video together, it kind of makes you a little teary-eyed because we all have a loved one that, can be older and they can get lost. So this woman was lost and she didn't know where she was at, and officers got there. They helped her. They talked to her. They had patience with her. They were able to take her back to her home in order for her to feel safe. So it was just an amazing thing to see. And even in our comments, a lot of people were relating to it because they also have people that, parents, grandparents. So
Right.
it was a very touching story.
Could you imagine, like one of your own family members that something like this happens to? And I also want to say, and I know if you've had this experience working here at the Phoenix Police Department, doing social media in general, something like this is something that an officer, you would say like, hey, you call up and like, I want to do a story on this interaction. And they're like, what? That's just what, this is the job, right? And they don't think it's special. They don't think it's worth doing a story on. And you've got to convince them like, no, I don't think you recognize like what you did was very important. And that goes back to your point of not wanting the kudos. And part of the job that you have, Yahtzee, is very interesting, is convincing officers that what they did was special. and very important and valuable to our community. And this is a perfect example of that. I don't know exactly what interactions you had with these officers, but I can only imagine they probably said something similar to that.
Yes, so it's always something that I realized starting to work here. Our officers do amazing things, and most of the times they don't want the recognition for it. So it's just having those conversations with them and being like, we want to show all the great things that you're doing. I know us as a department, we know the great things that they do, but not everyone in the community does. So that's our job with our social media, is showing all the great things that they do.
And they do it. They sometimes they do it alone. Sometimes they're with a partner. Sometimes they actually partner with members of the community. In this particular case, I want to talk about, and this is after all the show prep is usually where I start to lose it because emotionally it takes over. I'm just so proud of the work that's being done out there. But back in January, officers were helping a driver who had damaged the spare tire on their vehicle. She only had $30 to her name. They ended up helping her get to a tire shop, and the tire employees there at the shop stepped in to help with that. Do you remember that story?
Yes, so that was one of our, I think sometimes we have a lot of stories where we show, the good police work that our officers do, either arresting a suspect, which are great stories on its own, but these stories similar to the 91-year-old woman, to helping someone that is low on cash and they need help, and them stepping in is just showing the empathy that our officers have. It's more than them protecting our community, it's also being human and empathizing with people.
Yeah, and we host the awards ceremony every year, but we also honor civilians in there that do some just as heroic things, helping the members of their fellow community.
Giving you faith in humanity as well when you see what's going on in the community. And also love to give a shout out to Angels on Patrol. I know that they weren't a part of this one specifically, but there's many times where officers know as a resource you can call Angels on Patrol, which is a nonprofit organization that's able to raise money. And I'm sure in a situation like this, if you said, hey, we need to fix this tire, they would step up without even questioning it and offer those financial services. So that's another resource officers use as well.
Excellent. So before we run out of time, Rob, I want to cover this last one. This one took off, and it was shot from two angles, and it also took off from the private angle of this. So you talk about the Instacart delivery.
Yeah, so this one kind of hits a few of the things you mentioned at the beginning, but this one actually took off from the citizen's perspective. Few officers had actually delivered their groceries that they did from like a delivery service, if you will. Obviously, that's not common in any way, shape, or form. So they went ahead, took video, put it up on social media, and it exploded. Obviously, we noticed that trend, and we released the body cam from our angle. This was one of those officers that was okay understanding that, hey, this was kind of a different thing that we did, and being willing to talk about some of that story. It was just, it was unique in a sense that there was no hesitation for him to do this. And it didn't just help this person, it actually completed the sale for the person that was under arrest. That person still got paid on the back end. This individual still got their groceries. Everybody's happy. The individual had to take care of what he had to take care of, which was a misdemeanor warrant. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there was no hesitation when you talk to him. It was an easy decision for him to do. And it would have been easier to drive a block back to Fry's and give back the groceries. So.
Yahtzee, how far did that reach?
That got the video on its own, the one that was published, it hit over 1 million views. And then we were able to release our video that showed the different perspective, and it was able to go on national news, and our officer was able to do interviews. So show his side of the story.
Well, I want to thank you for all the work that you do. Ryan, thank you for helping us out as well. You did a lot of this work prior to Yahtzee arriving, but the two of you helping to tell our stories, it means so much to us. It means a lot to our families. It means a lot to our audience. And hopefully it means a lot to the communities that they know who to go to and who to call when they need that help. But I want to thank you both for joining us. I want to thank my co-host, Rob Shearer. I'd like to thank the crew for producing this. And I'd like to remind everybody out there that you too can help solve crime in your community by sending tips to Silent Witness. Visit silentwitness.org or call 480-WITNESS. View these and more stories on all of our social media platforms. Follow us, like us, subscribe. And you can see the video version of the 50 Info podcast on our YouTube channel. We're hiring. Go to joinphxpd.com. And remember, we're all in this together.